Did you know that a poor and abandoned shepherd girl, rejected by her own family, would one day become a beloved saint of France? She suffered illness, loneliness, and cruelty, yet miracles surrounded her life, and even the poorest days revealed God's hidden grace and love. Forgotten by the world but cherished by heaven, her humble faith continues to inspire believers centuries later. This is the story of Saint Germaine Cousin. Before beginning, drop an Amen in the comments, like this video, and subscribe for more stories of the saints. Don't forget to share it so others may discover this story and be inspired to live holier lives. Chapter 1. The world around her and the childhood of Saint Germaine Cousin. France, at the end of the 16th century, was still wounded by religious conflict. Catholics and Protestants had lived through years of fear, suspicion, and violence. Churches, families, and villages carried memories of division. In this troubled world, faith was not just an idea. For many ordinary Catholics, it was a refuge, a daily strength, and a quiet way to remain close to God. In the region of Toulouse, life was simple and often hard. The small village of Pibrac was surrounded by fields, animals, poor homes, and the steady rhythm of rural labor. People worked from dawn to dusk, depending on the land for survival. Yet the Catholic faith remained woven into daily life, through church bells, feast days, prayer, the sacraments, and devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. It was there, in Pibrac, that Germaine Cousin was born in 1579. She did not enter the world in wealth, comfort, or honor. Her family was poor, like many families of the countryside. No one looking at that humble home would have imagined that this little girl, hidden in poverty, would one day be loved by the church as a saint. From the beginning, Germaine's life bore the mark of suffering. She was born with a deformed hand, and she also suffered from scrofula, a painful disease often feared by others. Her body was fragile, and her appearance made her different from the children around her. Before she could understand the meaning of pain, pain had already become part of her story. Then another sorrow entered her young life. Germaine's mother died while she was still very small. A child who already needed tenderness lost the one person who might have protected her most gently. The warmth of a mother's arms disappeared too early. In that silence, Germaine's childhood became even more vulnerable, marked by loneliness before she had words to name it. Her father eventually married again, but the new household did not become a place of comfort for Germaine. Her stepmother saw her illness and deformity not with compassion, but as a burden. Instead of receiving special care, the child was treated harshly. In a home where she should have been loved, Germaine began to learn what rejection felt like. Because of her sickness, people feared she might spread disease to the other children. Little by little, Germaine was pushed away from normal family life. She was not welcomed at the table as a beloved daughter should have been. Yet in this painful separation, God had already begun a hidden work of grace, preparing a forgotten child to become a witness of humble holiness. Chapter 2. The Abandoned Shepherd Girl. From a very young age, Germaine was sent out to the fields to watch the sheep. While other children might have remained close to the warmth of home, she spent long hours beneath the open sky. Her small body was weak, but her duties were heavy. Day after day, she walked with the flock through the countryside of Pibrac, learning silence before she learned comfort. When evening came, Germaine was not welcomed into the house like the other children. She did not have a proper place near the family hearth. The home that should have sheltered her became a place from which she was kept apart. Night after night, she returned from the fields knowing that she would not be treated as a beloved daughter, but almost as an outsider. Often, her resting place was among the animals. Sometimes she slept in the stable, close to the smell of straw and livestock. At other times, she lay on a rough bed, made from dry vine branches. It was a poor and painful place for a child. Yet those humble surroundings, so easily despised by others, became part of the hidden path by which God shaped her soul. Her food was little, and her life was marked by want. There was no abundance, no softness, and very few human consolations. Hunger, cold, and loneliness became familiar companions. But poverty did not close her heart. The more she lacked earthly comfort, the more her soul seemed to open toward heaven, as if grace quietly entered the empty places that people had left behind. Germaine suffered injustice, yet she did not allow bitterness to rule her. She could have grown hard, angry, or resentful. Instead, she answered suffering with a meekness that came from God. This was not weakness. It was a quiet strength, born from faith. In her young heart, the gospel was taking root, teaching her to endure without hatred and to suffer without losing love. The long days in the fields became her school of holiness. The sheep, the wind, the earth, and the silence taught her patience. Her poverty taught her humility. Her abandonment taught her to place her trust not in human approval, but in divine providence. What seemed like a forgotten life was, in truth, a hidden formation in the virtues most dear to Christ. There, where people overlooked her, Germaine began to live deeply with God. The fields became her chapel, and solitude became a place of prayer. She was poor in the eyes of the world, but rich in the presence of the Lord. In being pushed away from human affection, she was drawn closer to the heart of Jesus, who never abandons the little ones. Chapter 3. Love for the Eucharist, Our Lady, and a Life of Reparation. In Germaine's hidden life, the greatest treasure was Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. She was poor, sick, and often unwanted, yet her heart knew where true riches were found. The Eucharist was not distant theology to her. It was the living presence of Christ, the one who saw her, loved her, and received her when others pushed her aside. Whenever the church bell rang across the fields, Germaine listened as if Christ himself were calling her. She would place her staff or distaff in the ground, leave the sheep to God's care, and hurry to Mass. For her, the holy sacrifice was worth every difficulty. No duty, distance, or human fear could keep her from the altar where Jesus gave himself. Tradition tells us that her trust was not disappointed. Though the pastures lay near woods where wolves were feared, Germaine's flock remained unharmed whenever she went to church. To the villagers, this became a sign of providence. To Germaine, it was simply the mercy of God, who cares for the little ones and blesses the faith of those who seek him first. Germaine also approached the sacraments with deep devotion. She went often to confession, not because she was hardened by sin, but because she wanted a pure heart before God. She received Holy Communion with reverence and love, understanding with simple faith that Christ came to nourish her soul. In the sacraments, she found healing deeper than any earthly comfort could give. Beside her love for the Eucharist, Germaine carried a tender devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. She loved Mary as a mother, perhaps even more deeply because she had lost her own mother so young. In Our Lady, she found gentleness, protection, and a path leading always to Jesus. Her prayers to Mary were simple, trusting, and filled with childlike affection. The feasts of Our Lady awakened special joy in Germaine's heart. As each Marian celebration approached, her prayer became more fervent and her sacrifices more generous. She did not have beautiful gifts to offer, nor fine clothing for the feast. Instead, she gave what she had: her patience, her purity, her hidden suffering, and her faithful love for the Mother of God. In a time still marked by religious conflict and offenses against Catholic worship, Germaine practiced small acts of penance and self-denial. She offered them especially in reparation for sacrileges committed against the Blessed Sacrament. Her life reminds us that reparation is not bitterness, but love wounded by indifference. From the fields of Pibrac, this poor shepherd girl loved Christ with a heart of fire. Chapter 4. Signs of Grace in a Hidden Life. At first, many villagers did not understand Germaine's devotion. To them, she was only a poor, sickly shepherd girl, often alone and badly treated. Her eagerness for prayer seemed strange, even excessive. Some smiled at her simplicity, while others dismissed her piety as childish. Yet Germaine did not defend herself. She simply continued loving God in the quiet way her heart knew. But little by little, unusual signs began to surround her life. The same villagers who once mocked her started to notice that something gentle and mysterious was happening. Germaine had no power, no learning, and no influence, yet grace seemed to accompany her steps. God was not making her great in the eyes of the world, but revealing his tenderness through her humility. One of the most remembered signs concerned her sheep. Whenever the church bell called her to Mass, Germaine would leave the flock in the fields and go to the parish church. Humanly speaking, this seemed careless, especially near woods where wolves were feared. Yet again and again, when she returned, the sheep were safe. Providence had guarded what her faith had entrusted to God. Another sign was spoken of during times of heavy rain and flooding. The streams around Pibrac could become dangerous and difficult to cross. Yet tradition tells that, more than once, the waters opened or lowered enough for Germaine to pass without her clothing being wet. For a poor shepherd girl longing to reach Mass, even nature seemed to become a path of mercy. These events were not treated by faithful hearts as entertainment or magic. They were seen as signs of God's care for one of his little ones. The Lord who watches over the lilies of the field and the birds of the air also watched over Germaine. In her weakness, people began to glimpse the strength of divine providence, quietly working where no one expected. Germaine's holiness did not come from status, education, or public achievement. She had no position in society and no earthly protection. What she possessed was simpler and more beautiful: faith, patience, humility, and trust. Her soul became transparent to God because it was not filled with pride. Through her ordinary duties, she showed that sanctity can grow in the poorest and most hidden places. So the girl once despised began to inspire reverence. People who had laughed at her piety now spoke of her with awe. They saw that beneath her poverty was a soul beloved by God. Germaine remained the same humble shepherdess, but the village slowly changed around her. In the eyes of faith, the abandoned child had become a living witness of heaven. Chapter 5. Charity, Forgiveness, and the Miracle of the Flowers. Although Germaine possessed almost nothing, she still found ways to help those who were poorer than herself. The little bread she received was often shared with the hungry. She understood suffering because she lived with it every day. Rather than allowing hardship to make her selfish, it made her compassionate. Her generosity did not come from abundance, but from a heart that trusted God to provide what she lacked. Those acts of kindness did not please her stepmother. Instead of seeing charity, she saw disobedience. She could not understand why Germaine would give away food when she herself had so little. Suspicion slowly grew into anger. The more Germaine helped others, the more criticism she received at home. Yet, she never stopped sharing, believing that every poor person deserved kindness and dignity. One winter day, the tension finally reached a dramatic moment. Germaine was carrying something in her apron as she walked through the village. Her stepmother became convinced that the girl had stolen bread from the household. Furious, she chased after her and demanded to know what she was hiding. The accusation was public and humiliating, but Germaine neither argued nor attempted to defend herself. At last, she was forced to open her apron. According to the traditional account, a remarkable sight appeared before everyone present. Instead of pieces of bread, fresh summer flowers spilled onto the ground. It was the middle of winter, a season when such blossoms should not have existed. The beauty of the flowers stood in sharp contrast to the harsh accusation that had prompted their discovery. This event became the most famous miracle associated with Saint Germaine. For generations, artists would depict her carrying flowers in her apron, and believers would remember the story as a sign of God's favor. Whether people were drawn first by wonder or by faith, the miracle pointed beyond itself. It revealed how the Lord often chooses the humble and forgotten to display His glory. What makes the story even more beautiful is Germaine's response. She did not use the miracle to shame her stepmother or prove her own innocence. She did not seek revenge for years of mistreatment. Instead, she remained gentle and forgiving. The flowers themselves seemed to symbolize her soul, pure, fragrant, and untouched by bitterness. God's grace had transformed suffering into something beautiful. Through this episode, Germaine became a living witness to the gospel. Her charity toward the poor reflected Christ's love. Her patience under false accusations echoed the example of the saints. Her forgiveness revealed a heart shaped by prayer and humility. In a world often ruled by anger and pride, the young shepherd girl showed another way. She taught that true holiness blossoms wherever love is stronger than resentment. Chapter 6. The Death of a Young Saint. Toward the end of Germaine's short life, her father began to understand more clearly what his daughter had endured. Perhaps the signs around her, and perhaps the quiet beauty of her soul, opened his eyes at last. He saw that the child he had allowed to suffer was not a burden, but a gift. Slowly, regret began to replace his blindness. Moved by this realization, he wanted Germaine to return fully into the household. He wished to give her a proper place among the other children as a true daughter of the family. It was a late gesture, but not without meaning. After years of rejection, the door of the home was finally being opened to the one who had so often been kept outside. Yet Germaine asked to remain in the humble way of life she had long known. This was not because she loved suffering for itself, but because humility had become her path to God. She did not demand comfort, honor, or repayment. Her heart had been formed in simplicity, and she desired only to continue serving the Lord quietly, without complaint or pride. In the early summer of 1601, Germaine was still living as she always had, praying, working, watching the sheep, and trusting God. Her days were ordinary in the eyes of the world, but precious in heaven. No great announcement surrounded her final days. There was only the hidden rhythm of fidelity, the kind of holiness that grows silently until God gathers it home. One morning, her father noticed that Germaine had not risen at the usual hour. This was unusual, for she was accustomed to the discipline of labor and prayer. Perhaps at first it seemed only a delay, a moment of weakness in a fragile body. But soon, concern led him to seek her. The silence around her resting place was deeper than ordinary sleep. He found her lying peacefully on her poor bed of vine branches. The girl who had known hunger, cold, rejection, and loneliness had passed from this world without noise or struggle. There was no earthly comfort around her, yet her death carried the quiet dignity of one who had lived close to God. The stable-like poverty of her life became the doorway to heaven. Germaine Cousin died at about 22 years old. Her life had been brief, hidden, and marked by suffering, but it was not wasted. In the eyes of faith, every tear offered to God had become fruitful. The abandoned shepherd girl of Pibrac left behind no wealth or power, only a luminous witness. Holiness can blossom even in the poorest and most wounded heart. Chapter 7. Canonization, Veneration, and Spiritual Legacy. After her death in 1601, Germaine was buried in the parish church of Pibrac, near the pulpit. It seemed to be the simple burial of a poor village girl whose life had passed unnoticed by much of the world. Yet God often hides his treasures beneath ordinary appearances. The shepherdess, who had lived in obscurity, was not forgotten in heaven, and her story was far from over. More than 40 years later, in 1644, the church opened her grave to make room for another burial. To the astonishment of those present, Germaine's body was found remarkably preserved. According to the testimonies of the time, her remains appeared fresh and intact despite the passing decades. The discovery immediately attracted attention. People began to see it as a sign that God wished to draw attention to her hidden holiness. As devotion to Germaine spread, many believers sought her intercession. Reports of healings and extraordinary favors soon followed. The sick prayed for relief, families asked for help, and countless ordinary people entrusted their needs to the humble shepherdess of Pibrac. Numerous cures were attributed to her prayers, and pilgrims increasingly came to honor her memory. What had begun as local devotion gradually extended far beyond her village. The years of the French Revolution brought a painful trial to many sacred things. In 1793, Germaine's remains were desecrated by those hostile to the faith. Her body was removed from its resting place and treated with disrespect. Yet when it was later recovered, much of it remained preserved despite these efforts. For many Catholics, this survival became another reminder that God continued to watch over his faithful servant. As the 19th century progressed, the Church carefully gathered evidence concerning Germaine's reputation for holiness. The cause for her beatification included testimonies of more than 400 miracles or extraordinary graces attributed to her intercession. These accounts came from people of different backgrounds and circumstances. Together they painted a remarkable picture of a saint whose influence continued long after her earthly life had ended. The Church eventually gave official recognition to this devotion. On the 7th of May, 1854, Pope Pius IX declared Germaine blessed. 13 years later, on the 29th of June, 1867, he canonized her as a saint of the Catholic Church. The poor shepherd girl who had once slept in a stable was now honored throughout the world. Her canonization became a powerful reminder that holiness is measured not by status, but by love. Today, Saint Germaine Cousin is honored as a patron of abandoned people, persons with disabilities, and all who suffer loneliness or rejection. In Christian art, she is often shown with a shepherd's staff, a sheep, a faithful dog, a distaff, or flowers gathered in her apron. These symbols tell her story without words. They remind us that God delights in raising up the humble and making their hidden lives shine forever. Chapter 8. A Prayer to Saint Germaine Cousin. Saint Germaine Cousin, humble shepherdess of Pibrac and faithful servant of God, we come before you with confidence and love. Though the world overlooked you, the Lord saw the beauty of your heart. Please intercede for us before his throne and obtain for us the grace to trust in his goodness through every season of our lives. Help us remain faithful to God when life becomes difficult. When we experience poverty, loneliness, rejection, or misunderstanding, teach us to persevere as you did. May we never lose hope in the Lord's providence. Strengthen our hearts to follow Christ with courage, even when the path is hidden, and remind us that God never abandons his children. Teach us to love Jesus in the Holy Eucharist with a simple and steadfast heart. Inspire us to seek him faithfully in the Mass, in prayer and in silent adoration. May the Blessed Sacrament become the center of our lives, just as it was the treasure of yours. Help us recognize Christ's presence and respond with reverence and devotion. Saint Germaine, you loved the Blessed Virgin Mary with the affection of a trusting child. Help us turn to our Heavenly Mother in moments of weakness, sorrow, and uncertainty. May Mary guide us closer to her Son and protect us beneath her mantle. Through her maternal care, may we find comfort, strength, and peace in every trial. We ask you to pray especially for those who feel forgotten by the world. Intercede for abandoned children, those who suffer abuse, persons with disabilities, the sick, the elderly, and all who carry heavy burdens. May they discover God's tender love and experience the consolation that comes from knowing they are precious in His sight. Saint Germaine, you answered cruelty with patience and injustice with forgiveness. Help us forgive those who have hurt us, even when it is difficult. Free our hearts from resentment, bitterness, and anger. Teach us to imitate Christ's mercy and to respond to wounds with charity, trusting that love is stronger than every injury we endure. Guide us in the way of humility, generosity, and complete trust in God. Help us to serve others with joy, to embrace our daily crosses with faith, and to seek holiness in ordinary life. Through your prayers, may we one day be united with you and all the saints in the eternal joy of heaven, praising God forever. Amen.